Petra draws millions because of one building. Carved into stone, it appears decorative, ceremonial, and safe. Archaeologists treated it as finished history. That assumption has now collapsed. New findings show the building was never meant to honor the dead or serve visitors. What lies beneath it was not placed there by accident. And once its purpose is understood, Petra can no longer be seen the same way again. The unspoken warnings and suppressed history. For more than 2,000 years, the structure known as Al-Khazne, often called the Treasury, has stood carved into the rock at the end of Petra's main entrance. Anyone who enters the ancient city must pass through a long, narrow rock corridor called the Sikh, and the Treasury is the first major structure revealed when that passage opens. Because of this placement, it became Petra's most seen, most photographed, and most talked about building. It shaped how the entire city was understood. Today, it is presented as a triumph of ancient design. According to long-repeated local accounts, it was once treated very differently. People were warned not to approach it casually, not to remain near it, and not to treat it as a place meant for ordinary use. According to Bedouin oral traditions shared with 19th century explorers, the ground in front of Al-Khazne was not considered safe. Some accounts describe it as a place where the living must never tread. Others warned that the earth itself responded to those who stayed too long. These were not symbolic stories. They were practical rules passed down within families. People were told not to sleep near the structure and not to allow children to play there, especially after sunset. Several early Western explorers recorded these warnings without fully understanding them. Journals from the period mention repeated claims of strange sounds during the night. According to reports, men who slept near Al-Khazne said they heard breathing coming from beneath the ground. Others described low sounds that seemed to rise from below the stone floor rather than from the surrounding cliffs. These reports were often dismissed as fear or superstition, but they appear repeatedly in records written by different travelers who had no contact with one another. Some explorers also noted physical conditions they could not explain. According to their observations, the air near the open space in front of Al-Khazne sometimes carried a sharp metallic smell, often described as iron-rich. Others recorded sudden drops in temperature that did not match conditions elsewhere in Petra. When stones were struck against the ground, the sound reportedly echoed in an unusual way, as if the rock beneath was hollow rather than solid. These observations were never confirmed at the time, but they contributed to growing unease. What made these accounts particularly compelling was their consistency. Travelers from different decades with no knowledge of each other's journals described remarkably similar phenomena. According to later reports, a Jordanian archaeological memo from the 1950s described the ground beneath Al-Khazne as structurally dangerous and not of natural formation. The document reportedly warned against disturbance and recommended restricting access. Within a year, the memo was removed from public circulation. No explanation was given, and the document does not appear in standard archives today. Scholars have pointed to visual inconsistencies on the outside of Al-Khazne. The symbols carved high on the front do not match burial designs seen elsewhere in Petra. Some researchers believe these markings resemble Nabatean symbols linked to restriction and separation rather than honor or remembrance. This interpretation remains debated, but it introduces a first break between appearance and purpose. The interior pushes that break much further. Unlike confirmed tombs across Petra, Al-Khazne lacks the basic features required for burial use. According to multiple studies, there are no niches, no planned arrangements, and no internal elements that support long-term funerary activity. The structure looks powerful from the outside, but inside it functions like an empty shell. According to some historians, Al-Khazne was not originally treated as a place of reverence. It was treated as a boundary. Its appearance drew attention, but its reputation demanded caution. The structure may have functioned less as a monument and more as a cover, built to distract from what lay beneath rather than invite people inside. As archaeologists later began examining why access had always been restricted, another realization followed. The resistance to excavation was not only about preservation, it was about preventing answers to a question that had been avoided for centuries. Political fear, lost records, and decades of concealment. For decades, excavation beneath Petra's most famous building did not fail because of technology or funding. It failed because permission was denied. According to public statements, Jordan's Department of Antiquities repeatedly cited structural risk. Officials warned that digging beneath the Treasury's forecourt could destabilize the stone and threaten collapse. That explanation appeared reasonable. It was also incomplete. According to reports from former project consultants, internal correspondence raised a different concern. The language did not focus on stone stress alone, it focused on consequence. Several documents reportedly warned of cultural panic if subsurface structures were exposed. The concern was not that digging might damage the building. It was that digging might reveal something that could not be easily explained or controlled. Between the 1960s and 2020, multiple foreign research teams submitted proposals to study the area beneath the forecourt. These requests came from universities and institutes with long records in non-invasive archaeology. Most were rejected or stalled indefinitely. At least 3 proposals referenced an earlier unauthorized dig from the 1930s. According to those applications, the notes from that dig were no longer available. They were said to have disappeared from institutional archives without explanation. One document from that earlier period did survive. According to several researchers who claimed to have seen it, the memo contained a direct warning. It stated, "Do not disturb the lower chamber. It is not a tomb." The document offered no further description. It did not explain what the chamber was. It only explained what it was not. The memo was never formally published, and its origin remains disputed. Local officials also played a role. According to some accounts, scientific teams were discouraged informally, even when formal approval seemed possible. The language used was not technical, it was cautionary. Researchers were told the space was sealed for protection, not preservation. This phrasing appeared in meeting notes and private conversations rather than official reports. It suggested an internal belief that excavation risked releasing something rather than uncovering it. There were also stories circulating within archaeological circles. According to some researchers, workers assigned to night shifts near the forecourt in the past reported hearing striking sounds beneath the ground. The sounds were described as rhythmic rather than random. According to these accounts, several workers refused to return after those incidents. These claims were never verified publicly, but they contributed to the site's reputation among professionals. In 2024, the position changed. Permission was granted suddenly, and with little public explanation. According to reports, pressure from advanced research institutions played a role. So did leaked satellite data that revealed density anomalies directly beneath the Treasury. These anomalies did not match natural rock formations. The imaging showed not just empty space, but architectural features, straight lines and right angles that could only be human-made. The approval came with strict conditions. Excavation was limited to reversible trenches only. Soil removal required millimeter-level documentation. Multiple agencies monitored the process. Sensors were installed to track stone stress and movement at all times. According to team members, these restrictions were unlike anything they had experienced at comparable sites. Privately, officials issued a final warning. According to those present, team leaders were told, "This project is not treasure hunting. Do not treat what you find as heritage. Treat it as containment." With permission granted under extraordinary tension, researchers turned to non-invasive scans, and the technology revealed a chamber that should not have existed at all. The chamber whose design proved it was never a tomb. Once permission was finally granted, archaeologists did not begin with excavation. They began with scans. According to project records, the first step was to study what lay beneath the ground without disturbing it. The team deployed 3 separate technologies. Ground-penetrating radar mapped density changes. Electrical resistivity measured how the ground responded to current. Magnetometry tracked variations in magnetic fields. Each method worked independently. All 3 produced the same result. Beneath the forecourt in front of the treasury, there was a void. It was not irregular. It was not fractured. It had straight edges and defined corners. According to reports, the shape was rectangular and sharply bounded. Natural cavities do not form that way. The geometry alone indicated deliberate construction. When technicians overlaid the data, the proportions became clearer. The chamber followed ratios seen in a small number of Nabatean structures referenced in ancient inscriptions associated with restriction and containment. These proportions did not match known tomb designs. Funerary chambers from the same period show different layouts, different access points, and different internal divisions. According to specialists, the match was not symbolic, it was structural. As scanning continued, technicians encountered a second problem. Several radar sweeps returned distorted signals. The waves behaved as if something inside the chamber was interfering with resonance. According to multiple technicians, the equipment was recalibrated and rerun. The distortion remained. It did not follow patterns associated with machine error or surface interference. The signal disruption appeared localized within the chamber itself. Magnetic data added another layer. According to analysis reports, the chamber showed residual heat signatures inconsistent with burial spaces. Burial chambers typically stabilized to surrounding rock temperature over time. This space did not. The readings suggested exposure to repeated high heat events before sealing. Researchers noted that such patterns align with enclosed spaces used for controlled burning rather than ceremonial burial. When the team enhanced the radar models further, internal sediment patterns became visible. Instead of settling evenly, the material inside appeared compressed in curved formations. According to geotechnical analysts, this pattern suggests internal movement before the chamber was sealed. Sediment had been displaced and pushed outward, as if bodies or large masses had shifted inside a confined space. At this stage, the working interpretation changed. According to one researcher from St. Andrews University who reviewed the composite reconstruction, the design indicated a one-way function. The chamber allowed entry. It did not support exit. He reportedly stated, "Whatever this is, it was not meant to let people out." That assessment circulated quickly within the team. As work continued, conditions above ground also changed. According to some team members, remaining near the forecourt after sunset became difficult. Reports described a sense of pressure and mild disorientation. Others noted static charge buildup on equipment and clothing. These effects were not documented as hazards, but several researchers chose not to remain on site after dark. Formally, the structure was labeled Anomaly C to avoid speculation. Informally, the language shifted. According to internal notes, team members began referring to it as the locked chamber. The name reflected what the data showed. This was not an accidental cavity. It was a sealed structure designed with precision and purpose. At that point, the conclusion was unavoidable. There was a human-made chamber beneath the treasury. Its design did not match burial use, it did not match storage, it matched containment. With undeniable evidence of a sealed structure beneath the treasury, excavation became inevitable, forcing archaeologists to confront the first chamber and the gateway it concealed. Steps cut for confinement. Excavation did not begin with heavy tools. According to project protocols, archaeologists switched to wooden instruments and soft brushes as soon as they reached the upper edge of the sealed structure. This was not ceremony. It was caution. Metal tools could spark or fracture stone surfaces that had remained sealed for centuries. Every movement was slowed. Every layer was documented before the next was touched. The first clear structure appeared just beneath the surface. Narrow stone steps cut directly into the rock began to descend. They were steep and uneven. According to architectural specialists, the angle was wrong for funerary use. Burial stairways are built for repeated, careful access. These steps were not. They dropped sharply and offered little footing. Some researchers believe this design would have caused disorientation and instability for anyone descending. As excavation continued downward, the walls lining the stairway became visible. They were plain. There were no carvings, no symbols, no decoration of any kind. Instead, the stone blocks were tightly fitted together in a way that resisted outward force. According to structural analysis, the reinforcement pattern made sense only if pressure was expected from inside the chamber. This was not construction meant to prevent collapse. It was construction meant to hold something in. Closer inspection revealed markings on the walls. Shallow grooves and irregular scoring patterns appeared at arm height along several sections of stone. According to reports, these marks do not match tool work used in construction. Some specialists believe they resemble scraping caused by hands or objects dragged repeatedly against the surface. The placement and repetition suggested movement and resistance rather than finishing work. Partway down the descent, the team uncovered a secondary passage branching away from the main stairway. It did not remain open for long. The tunnel was packed tightly with stone and debris. Analysis of the fill showed it had been forced in deliberately from the outside. Tool marks on the ceiling surface confirmed this. According to some researchers, the passage may have served as an escape route at some point, then was intentionally blocked to prevent movement back toward the surface. As the excavation deepened, the environment changed. Team members reported that the air felt heavier. Photogrammetry data captured dust behavior that did not match open trench conditions. Particles settled quickly and unevenly, suggesting limited airflow. This was not a natural effect of depth alone. It indicated an enclosed space below that had not exchanged air normally. Sound also behaved differently. According to reports from the excavation team, ordinary speech produced faint secondary echoes that did not align with the shaft's shape. Words seemed to return softer and distorted, as if reflected through narrow internal spaces. Some acoustic specialists believe the geometry of the descent was designed to manipulate sound, reducing clarity and increasing confusion. At the bottom of the stairway, the final barrier emerged. A large stone slab sealed the chamber completely. Its fit was precise. There were no gaps, no channels for air. Tests showed zero airflow penetration. According to engineers on site, this level of sealing is rare and unnecessary unless absolute isolation is the goal. At that moment, the function of the structure became clearer. This descent was not built to welcome. It was built to control. Every design choice pointed in the same direction. What lay beyond the sealed slab would finally test that conclusion. The orderly dead. When the sealed chamber was finally opened, the first thing archaeologists noticed was order. The skeletons inside were not scattered or collapsed. They were laid out with care. Each skeleton rested intact, with bones aligned and undisturbed. According to excavation reports, this level of preservation could only occur if the chamber had remained sealed for a very long time. There was no sign of later entry, no disturbance. Whatever had been placed here had been left exactly as intended. Closer examination revealed unusual skeletal features. Several remains showed bone markings that forensic specialists are currently analyzing to understand their significance. The markings did not match patterns commonly associated with natural decay or burial pressure, prompting further study. The positions of the skeletons deepened that concern. Some were arranged in poses not found in known Nabatean burial customs. A number of individuals were placed face down or bent forward in postures unusual for typical Nabatean burial practices. According to researchers familiar with regional funerary practice, these positions have no ceremonial meaning. They are not symbolic of honor or mourning. They appear imposed rather than chosen. Objects placed with the skeletons added another layer of unease. There were no valuable goods, no jewelry, no items that signaled rank or remembrance. Instead, small bowls, jars, and simple ceramics were positioned with exact spacing. One vessel was found pressed tightly against a rib cage, as if held in place at the moment of death. According to some archaeologists, this placement suggests ritual control rather than offering. The items seem to serve a function rather than convey respect. Chemical testing of the chamber walls produced unexpected results. According to laboratory reports, traces of treated limestone were detected across several surfaces. This treatment is associated in Nabatean contexts with purification or containment practices, not standard burial preparation. The substance appears to have been applied deliberately and evenly, suggesting a controlled process rather than decoration. The arrangement of objects around the skeletons also followed patterns. Several items formed repeated spatial groupings that resemble symbols referenced in Nabatean inscriptions describing restricted spaces sometimes called houses of silence. According to some scholars, these patterns were meant to mark containment zones rather than graves. This interpretation remains debated, but the repetition was clear. Another detail stood out. Several skeletons were arranged in pairs. They were not positioned as families. There was no indication of age or relation matching. According to excavation notes, this pairing suggests selection rather than lineage. The individuals appeared chosen and grouped for reasons not explained by burial tradition. The air inside the chamber told its own story. It was stale but stable. According to environmental readings, the chamber had maintained a sealed internal condition for centuries. There was no sign of airflow or exchange. This stability supports the idea that the space was built for long-term isolation rather than visitation. Taken together, the evidence pointed in one direction. This chamber was not designed to honor the dead. It was designed to manage people. Every element suggests control before death and isolation after it. According to some researchers, this was not a tomb that failed. It was a system that worked exactly as intended. But the questions raised here did not end with this chamber. They only grew more urgent. What waited beyond the next sealed space would force archaeologists to confront the full purpose of what had been built beneath Petra. The true purpose revealed. When the second sealed chamber was opened, the change was immediate. According to excavation reports, a rush of trapped air escaped the opening. Team members described it as heavy and difficult to breathe. It carried the smell of decay mixed with soot and sharp chemical traces. One researcher later stated that it felt like breathing something that had been sealed away from the world for far too long. As visibility improved, the condition of the chamber became clear. The walls were darkened by layers of soot. According to specialists, this pattern could not be explained by accidental fire or later intrusion. The marks were even and widespread, suggesting repeated controlled burning carried out while the chamber was sealed. This type of activity aligns with containment or purification practices rather than burial tradition. The floor presented a very different scene from the chamber above. Here, skeletons were not arranged. They were piled. Limbs overlapped. Joints were twisted out of alignment. Many skulls showed fractures. Ribs were broken. According to forensic analysis, this damage occurred before death or during extreme confinement. It did not match natural collapse or long-term settling. Among the remains, one detail stopped the team. A child skeleton was found pressed tightly against an adult. The position suggested a final attempt at protection rather than ceremonial placement. According to reports, this arrangement reflected panic and crowding. It did not reflect ritual, it reflected fear. Near the far wall, 3 skeletons stood apart from the rest. They were positioned deliberately. One showed signs of higher status based on remaining markers. The other 2 displayed severe trauma. According to some specialists, this arrangement may indicate ritual execution or forced escort into confinement. The contrast between order and violence was striking. Objects recovered from the chamber added to the picture. Several ceramic jars contained thick residue. Early testing identified iron-rich compounds mixed with ash and plant resin. According to historical records, similar mixtures were used in ancient contexts to cause confusion. compliance, or disorientation. These substances were not decorative. They were functional. Examination of the bones revealed more evidence of restraint. Dislocations consistent with binding were present in multiple skeletons. According to forensic experts, these injuries occur when movement is restricted for extended periods. This supports the conclusion that people were held here while alive. What was missing mattered as much as what was found. There were no inscriptions, no funerary texts, no names, no markers of remembrance. The chamber offered no acknowledgement of the individuals inside. According to archaeologists, this absence was deliberate. Memory was not the goal, removal was. When architectural design, physical evidence, and historical context were considered together, a clear pattern emerged. Ancient Nabatean sources reference restricted structures used to isolate individuals considered dangerous, contaminated, or socially unacceptable. According to some researchers, this chamber fits those descriptions precisely. This reframed the meaning of the structure above. The ornate face carved into the rock was not the purpose. It was the cover. It drew attention upward while hiding what lay below. The building did not invite people in. It kept something out of sight. What was uncovered beneath Petra does not add a footnote to history. It changes how the entire site is understood. The most famous structure in Petra was not built for honor. It was not built for worship. It was not built for the dead. According to the evidence now in view, it was built to confine the living and to erase them completely. That is the truth the stone was meant to hide. If enjoyed watching this video, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel.